The Rainbow Tower. Written by Alex Tymms. Illustrated by R H Stewart. Episode 25. Red. Jed tried to squint at the shape where the voice had come from, but the light was still too bright for him to see clearly. He says this was his mother's. It was the executive again. He heard something being slid across the table. He presumed it was his phone. "Ha!" came a laugh from the far end. "Trust Julia to have a banned device. Typical. One rule for her, one rule for everyone else." There was a pause. Jed listened hard. "What you say might be true. He could well be Julia's. There's one way we can find out, of course." "Check him." Jed was pulled sideways towards the wall, felt his hand pushed onto something wet and sticky. It felt exactly the same as the mucus on the organic tunnels. As he touched it, Jed felt whatever it was recognised him, just like when the architect had connected with him. They knew exactly who he was and where he was. Jed just wished it worked both ways, for when his hand was pulled away, he still had no clue who he'd made contact with. Jed's hand was pulled up. At last he could make out the shape of his fingers as his eyes adjusted. He saw the executive inspecting his skin. "Nothing," the man said. "No burns, no blisters." At the far end of the table, Swenson clapped his hands. "Excellent! Oh, good work, Aidan." Jed was pushed down into a chair. It was incredibly soft as he landed, and it bounced up and down slightly as well as swivelling from side to side. He was sitting at one end of a huge wooden table. Jed had never seen one so big or so shiny. Now he realised why the light was so bright and had been difficult for him. Down one wall were windows, and shining straight through them was the sun. Opposite him, across the huge table, was the only other occupied chair, those down either side being empty. Now Jed could see him. Swenson looked unremarkable. He'd expected some monster of a man, not a grey-haired suit with glasses, who he could have walked past in the corridor without noticing. Yet here was the man who'd killed his mother and put his great-grandfather in a tank. "Are you going to retire me too?" Jed asked. "Pickle my brain?" "Ah, you've met the retired," Swenson said, sounding impressed. "You have done some exploring, haven't you?" Swenson sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers in front of him while looking over the top of his spectacles down the table at Jed. "I wish I could take credit for the retired. Brilliant idea, quite brilliant. But all done before my time, I'm afraid." An aide entered from the door behind Swenson. "Tea?" the chief executive asked Jed as the aide placed a tray with cups and a pot on the table. I'm sorry," Jed replied, taken aback. "Would you like a cup of tea? There's biscuits too. Ginger snaps or coconut macaroons?" Jed had to force himself to think straight. He wasn't here for a friendly chat. This man had done unspeakable things. He glanced up at the enforcers flanking his chair. They were all the proof he needed that despite what Swenson may pretend, he wasn't civilised at all. "No, not if they come from the food you poisoned." Swenson raised an eyebrow. "So, you came from blue through to green. Oh yes, that would make sense." He broke a biscuit and took a bite of it. "And I saw what you did with all the bodies," Jed said. "They go straight into our food supply. Find any fingernails in there?" he asked. A flicker of irritation crossed Swenson's face, and he put the biscuit on his saucer, waving the aide away now his tea was poured. "You really have worked it out, haven't you? Very efficient, don't you think? We reuse everything else, as you know from your work in Violet. So why not our own bodies?" "Because it's poisoning us and the building," Jed exclaimed. Swenson took off his glasses and placed them on the table next to Jed's phone. "You know about the tower too. Most impressive." then you'll appreciate that not only do we now have enough to feed ourselves easily, the tower grows twice as fast as it used to, and at no extra cost to anyone. Swenson picked up his cup. Are you sure about the tea? Jed stared at the man. Swenson was clearly convinced he'd done nothing wrong, had deluded himself that pumping dead people into the food supply and directly into the fabric of the building was a good thing. He looked away as Swenson sipped his tea. As he did so, he saw a hole in the wall not far from him. It leaked mucus, and just inside he could make out a bundle of nerves and muscle fibres. So that was where they had put his hand. I want to make you an offer, Swenson said, replacing his cup on his saucer. Jed noted that the man hadn't touched the biscuit since the comment about the fingernails. I want you to come and work for me. Once again, Jed stared in amazement. HR was supposed to have given you a message in violet. I'm not sure why they didn't. You mean the same HR team that tried to sack Trevor as well as me? Jed asked. Trevor, yes, your babysitter. He made it terribly difficult to find you. Jed couldn't believe the man didn't know. Surely he had to. Well, they didn't report because they were all eaten by the giant mass that grew out of the waste, the same mass that has destroyed violet, indigo and probably blue by now. It was Swenson's turn to stare. He put his glasses back on and pursed his lips. I had hoped we could have a grown-up conversation. Jed leapt to his feet. What? You don't know, do you? The enforcer shoved him back down. You've no idea what I'm talking about, have you? Let's get on with the matter in hand, shall we? Swenson said. I will ask one more time. I want you to work here in red. Willingly. The last word was said in such a way that there was clearly no choice in the matter. Jed ignored the threat. You just don't get it, do you? I can't come and work here in red because very soon there won't be a red, there won't be a tower and there won't be anything. Swenson jabbed his finger towards Jed. Now he looked more like the man Jed had imagined. You are too like your mother, he snapped. And are you going to kill me too? She retired, Swenson said shortly. You killed her. Jed tried to leap to his feet, but this time the enforcers were ready. Stop trying to hide behind clever words, he spat as they held him down in his seat. Well, since we can't be civilised about this, Swenson nodded to the executive, let's see if we can't make you a bit more like your father. Or how he used to be, at least. My father? Jed asked before he could stop himself. You see, there are some things you don't know. If you please, Aidan. The enforcers shoved Jed to the back of the chair as the executive placed a helmet and rolled out a pack of syringes on the table in front. He began inserting the syringes into slots on the outside of the headpiece. Swenson rose to his feet at the far end of the room. There should be a good few years of quiet compliance in you before you start playing up. Give us a chance to bring those damn builders back into line, as you'll find me a way to flush them out. Swenson went to one of the windows and looked out. Then I can work out a more efficient way of controlling the building, removing any more reliance on your family. Jed stared at Swenson. He didn't understand. What was he on about? What builders? Before he could ask, Aidan lifted up the completed helmet. You, Swenson said dramatically, are going to be like them. He gestured to the enforcers. Well, not exactly. You won't get the uniform. Aidan stepped towards Jed. But you'll be just as obedient, just as loyal. After all, it's not your mind I want, but your DNA. The enforcers hauled Jed upright, squeezing on his arms in exactly the same location as they always did. Jed winced at the pain. You can go places I need to go, but can't. And then you can take over from your father. Aidan lifted the helmet over Jed's head. What about my father? Where is he? What's he got to do with you? Not again. Ever since the architect had refused to talk about him, Jed had worried that, like his mother, his father would be a disappointment. Someone who'd let him and everyone else down. Could he really be in league with Swenson? "You're insane," he snapped, trying to hide his feelings. "It's my job to do what's necessary to keep everyone happy," Swenson replied. Jed watched the helmet descend. He glanced up and saw Swenson lick his lips at the far end of the room. This time, Jed really couldn't think of any way out. Thank you very much for listening to The Rainbow Tower. To see more of R H Stewart's excellent artwork, you'll find him on Instagram at roy.hootson.stewart. For Alex Tymms, why not try the novel OutCaste at ao3.com? Or, for something completely different, check out the Amier series on YouTube or at amier.com, also by Alex Tymms. The Rainbow Tower. Text copyright Alex Tymms. Illustrations copyright R H Stewart. The right of Alex Tymms and R H Stewart to be identified as the author and illustrator of this work has been asserted in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988.